Jim Rahtz here, your old man outdoors. Hey, while we're socially distancing, I thought I'd pull together some slides of a trip I took to the Muir Trail. It's one of the most iconic trails in the whole U.S. and just a beautiful scenic hike. Let me pull up the PowerPoint and let's get started. The Muir Trail should be on every hiker's bucket list. It is 210 miles of spectacular. The JMT shares 170 miles with the Pacific Crest Trail, and by most accounts is the most scenic section of the PCT. Running from Yosemite National Park to Kings Canyon National Park, the trail travels to the top of Mount Whitney, the highest peak in the continental United States. The route stays within the Sierra Nevada mountains. Known for their beauty, the Sierras were called the Range of Light by John Muir. Beyond jaw-dropping views of places like Nevada Falls, Half Dome, Cathedral Peak, and the high passes, the JMT is all about water. Even though I was there during that recent drought, there was still flowing water through places like here in Evolution Valley. Snowmelt from the high peaks kept the creeks going strong, and there are beautiful alpine lakes along the entire route as well. Much of the trail did appear dry though, and there was evidence of fires. I had a couple pretty smoky days, but I was never driven off the trail. Between there being plenty of water and being either in a national park or a wilderness area the entire way, potential wildlife sightings on and near the trail were second to none. All the wildlife normally thought of in a wilderness lives near the JMT. Deer were thick throughout the lower elevations and just seemingly ignored hikers. What really stood out on my hike, though, were the close encounters with predators. I happened upon coyote and even a bobcat while on the trip. The multiple sightings of bear left no doubt as to why food canisters are required. The trail itself follows a pattern. Beginning in Yosemite Valley, the JMT heads for higher elevations, but it is well constructed with grades that even pack animals can handle. The hike eventually climbs to a high pass between 10 and 13,000 feet and then drops back down. Climbing again, this process is repeated over 11 passes, not to mention Mount Whitney. I used a tent rather than a hammock system on the trail. Much of the trail travels through areas there's just not a lot of options to hang. Although the trail was relatively easy to follow, I always brought route finding assistance. On the JMT, I used the Guthook phone app, but I also always bring a map and compass as well. And the batteries never died on my JMT trail guide by Blackwoods Press. Resupplies got tougher as I traveled from north to south. The last relatively convenient resupply option is at Muir Trail Ranch, 110 miles into your 220 mile or so hike. There you can pick up a bucket that you had shipped to yourself ahead of time. It is not cheap, but consider the buckets arrive by horseback, and apparently a lot of hikers shop at Home Depot. Cramming enough food into your bear canister to take you through the second half of the trail can be a challenge, to say the least. But they were not only required, bear canisters just make good sense. At times, there's not that many trees to use to bear bag your food, and the bears in this park and this area are smart enough to defeat most any bear bagging technique. After 11 passes, a big old mountain showed up on the horizon. That'd be Mount Whitney. I made a final camp at the low spot before the big climb. At this point though, the low spot was at 10,700 feet and I was still 7.5 miles from the summit. If you look here on the photo, there's a guy filtering water, which is something I always do on the trail because you never know what might be upstream. Starting about 4:30 a.m., I started for the peak of Mount Whitney, reached Guitar Lake, where many people start their assault just as dawn broke. From there to the top, it was still 5 miles and a 3,000-foot vertical climb, and it was long and oxygen starved. At this point, there's really only about 50% of the air available at sea level. At the end of the trail was the only mountaintop view of the entire trail, but it's a doozy. At 14,505 feet, the summit of Mount Whitney is the official endpoint of the JMT. However, despite being done with the trail, there's still about 10 more miles to walk to get back off of Whitney. By the way, the reason I put this picture in here is to remind you, bring sunscreen. On the route down, there is a lot of switchbacks. Eventually, you can see down, there's a hole in the mountains there. You can see a valley, that's where you're heading. That's your goal for the day. And I got to my goal at about 3:30 p.m. Despite climbs to spots like this, perhaps the biggest challenge with the JMT is just getting a permit. If you want to start at Happy Isles in Yosemite, plan on faxing in an application 24 weeks before your planned start date. By the end of the day, you'll find out if you secured a permit. You probably didn't. A new online rolling lottery system keeps you from having to repeat the process each day, but the odds are still very much against you. Per the National Park Service, over 90% of all applications are denied. One hiker I met on the trail had been denied 22 times before she received her permit. Regardless of the aggravation though, and the physical challenges, this trail is well worth the effort. Scenery and wildlife are second to none. Hike this trail, you'll be glad you did. If you want more of my take on backpacking throughout the U.S., be sure and hit the subscribe button. Take care and keep hiking.